What's up, IT friends? Happy Tuesday. How's it going? So, first things first, just to get this out of the way. Yes, I do come from New England, and I understand I'm wearing a Blue Jays hat right now. And the Red Sox and the Blue Jays are both in the AL East, so they are technically competing teams. Hear me out. The one thing we and the Blue Jays share in common is we hate the Yankees. And right now, it seems like the Blue Jays have a better shot at defeating them this season. So I'm just hedging my bets. Not a trader. Still have the Red Sox. Okay. So a couple weeks ago, I had an opportunity to go to an event and hear the amazing Jonathan Crow from Ninja speak to a room full of enterprise SaaS platform community managers. And super cool event because, first of all, it wasn't an IT Bros event, which was a very pleasant change. And then secondly, I got to learn a lot as I sort of sat there unqualified to be in that room with a bunch of people who were real smart and do levels of community management at a scale and size that my little brain couldn't comprehend. So that was awesome. But I did pick something up that I wanted to bring back down here to all of us, feeding at the bottom of the IT spectrum for scraps, that maybe we could learn a little bit. In that some of our SaaS vendors here in the MSP space that have not quite reached that enterprise size could also learn a little bit. So we're going to talk about that today. So my biggest overall takeaway was that these large enterprise SaaS vendors, in many cases, these folks have communities that have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people in them. They have a whole host of challenges and problems that we don't really have to deal with. It was all very fascinating, but they were all really interested in the types of communities that our side of the market down at the SMB side had sort of managed to grow. Because while our communities tend to be a lot smaller, even our big communities, they're a lot higher engagement driven, and that engagement tends to be entirely by us, by the members of the community. There doesn't really seem to be as much of a push to have our corporate overlords getting in there and forcing us to participate in the community. And a lot of these SaaS vendors are very interested on how we've managed to do that. And I think somewhere floating around there is a recording of it, because Jonathan's topic was pretty much exactly how to do that. But it reminded me of something that aggravates me a little bit. So ultimately, and I am even more aware of this now that I moonlight during the day as a vendor, the communities that these enterprise platforms are so jealous of really were, for the most part, started by and are definitely exclusively powered by the customers, the MSPs, the sysadmins, and the employees at vendors that are coming into these just as another person in tech. They're very unique in that sense that most of the content, the messaging, the driving, the culture has really all been dictated by us. It is objectively our house that we're allowing these vendors to sort of come visit us in. And in the same way, a couple weeks ago, I made a video about asking smart questions in an educated community. And one of the main lessons there was you should kind of learn how that community works before you just enter it. I want to offer that same advice to some of the vendors that are really all the vendors that are in our wonderful little SMB area, that ultimately this is the MSP and sysadmin and employee and your customer's house, not yours. And they welcome us to be there, but we should make an effort to take our shoes off and not be dicks while we're visiting. So I want to talk about 4 things that I think that our SMB vendors could pay a little bit more attention to, so that we can keep that awesome community vibe that has made big corporate SaaS so jealous of what we're doing. So there were a few things, but the biggest one is the same point I made in my video for MSP employees and sysadmin folks who go to ask a question in a forum. You need to do some research before you open your mouth, vendors. And what I mean by that, it's a little bit more nuanced for the vendor. I don't just mean do market analysis and research about the best time of the day to post your content. What I mean is different, if we think of these like houses, different people's houses have different cultures and how they operate. And it can be very subtle. It might be one house, it's very obvious, take off your shoes before entering. But in another house, it might be something that's way more subtle. It might be that in this house, we always ask for a glass of water first before we're offered something more than that. It's not always going to be as obvious as taking off your shoes. But the thing is, the people who are already there, we can tell when you've bothered to do zero effort research to figure out how our community works, the kind of language we use, how we post, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're a community member and you're coming in and you haven't done that research, your question's not going to get answered, but you're still welcome. If you're a vendor and you are ignorant of sort of both the literal but then the unspoken cultural rules of that community, and you just sort of kick in the door and start talking, you won't be welcome anymore. And very quickly in the SMB space, you just won't be welcome in the space. And I don't have to name any names for everybody to know right off the top of their head examples of, in some cases, some pretty big vendors that have run afoul of this. And the industry as a whole really doesn't give a shit. And they're pretty much unwelcome everywhere. So it is worth paying attention to. If you're a vendor and you're listening to this, I think it's important to remember that not every so you may have a particular post content, not every style of post is going to fit every community. So like on LinkedIn, very common to add a lot of emojis to your post, to have a lot of spacing, line breaks. That's not going to fly on Reddit. The minute we see emojis on Reddit, you can just get out. And if you were to go into like Discord or Slack and post a long formatted post with line space, just get out. So it can be subtle stuff like that. And it's definitely worth looking into because your audience isn't stupid. And the other side of doing your research is keep in mind that like in any community like this that's largely driven by the community members, we know who shows up weekly or daily and we know who doesn't. And so when you come in with that sort of like, hey, fellow kids, and we know that this person doesn't normally comment or post, that puts you in a position where anything you say next is going to be taken with a significantly raised eyebrow. And that's why you'll see a lot of vendors will say stuff like, oh, Reddit and Discord are toxic. No, they're not toxic. It's just we know you don't normally make an effort to hang out with us, so we know you're full of shit when you pretend to do that. So just put in the smallest amount of effort to avoid that, and you won't have that problem. So the next one is it's a little bit trickier, I think, superficially for vendors. So I want to clarify something that might not make sense to some of the MSPs that normally listen to me. So the point here is that you want to add value first before you get into whatever you're pitching. And so I think everybody understands that. But with vendors specifically, there's going to be two different categories of people who are participating and posting in communities. There's going to be people that actually have demonstrable skill set in this industry who generally are not in the sales and marketing department. And then there's going to be professional sales and marketing people. And so if you're a professional sales and marketing person and you're going in and you're just posting what is clearly supposed to be an advertisement, I'm not saying you're off the hook, but I don't have the same expectation from you. What I'm talking about here is the other half of the vendors, the half of the vendors that develop the products, work on the products, support the products. These are the folks that tend to get in a lot of these communities because they're a little more comfortable in them, and they see someone else having a problem, pain they can solve, and they get excited because their product can solve the pain, and they launch right into how their product will solve the pain. And like all of that, it's awesome. I love that you're paying attention to the fact that the community has needs and that your product can actually solve a need. What I need you to do is Hakuna those tatas, and you need to take a step back. Is what you're posting offering objective value, period, in the absence of it being something that drives me to buy from you? And if it is not that, and you are not an actual marketing person, I would stop and think about, is what I'm posting actually going to help my brand? And we see this a lot, especially on Reddit, which is where people get accused of being toxic. An MSP will pose a question, a problem statement, and a vendor will come in and say, I make a thing that solves that. You should totally contact me and I'll fix it for you. And I know some of these vendors personally, and they are amazing humans, and they mean 100% of every word they posted. But most of you don't know these vendors. So when you see that, you're like, wow, this jackass was trying to sell me something and he didn't even tell me how to solve it. So vendors, if that's you, you need to make sure you explain, agnostic of your problem, something that will add value, that will help that MSP or that sysadmin solve their problem first. And then one of the most effective strategies I've seen, if you consistently do that, sign your posts with who you are and what vendor you're from. Because you know what'll start happening? I'll start noticing, and Huntress is a great example. If you want a good example, Huntress is a great example of this. I'll start noticing when these guys post, they post value content that helps me. I want to learn more about them. And then I make the choice to go over and buy from them versus, or at least learn about them, versus them for the best intentions hammering their product down my throat. And Huntress really is a great example. Go look at them on Reddit or any other forums. You never see like Kyle or something getting on and being like, you know what, if you had Huntress, these problems would be solved. That's certainly implied, but he never says that ever. Never even comes close to saying it. Doesn't even like become adjacent with, the same island that's on. Just comes in, adds value added content, and you're like, hey, those are those smart people. I want to go learn more about what they make. That's really what you should be doing here. So dovetailing off that last one, if you are going to be doing a disguised pitch post, and I understand that's going to happen sometimes. So what I mean by this is not a product announcement where you're adding a new feature or releasing something, and not a post that would be within a community that's designed just for your product. So like, I don't mean like R3CX or R ConnectWise or the Halo Discord group. Like, I mean in one of the more community oriented groups where it's probably against the terms of service to just come and pitch. So you have to do a disguised pitch post. If you choose to do a disguised pitch post, which we just talked about, probably is a risky proposition anyways, please, if you do that, give me enough information to actually make an informed choice about buying your product. So if you are going to come in and say, yeah, I'll use Helped as an example. If Helped is going to come in and say, hey, we offer 24/7 live call answering, and here's how you would solve this MSP, and here's how Helped could solve it specifically. Click here to find out more. I don't want to click here to find out more. So if you are going to do that, then tell me exactly how you're going to solve my pain. Don't sort of like theatrically paywall or click wall me because you want to collect how many, impressions you got through that post. Like, so in that case, like in Help's case, like just list out like, this is the plan, these are the minutes, this is the price. You're not going to be received well either way by the community, but at least that post, like, I can understand beginning, middle, and end everything I need from you. So please, vendors, if you are going to make a disguised pitch post, put enough in there where I actually understand your pitch. And so this brings me to last point, which I feel is the most important, although it's probably not going to be the most important for most of you. This is something that has driven me crazy for years. I had this problem in this space. I had this problem before I was in this space, in the AV space. And I don't think of myself as a stupid person. Please tell me what your product does. And specifically, if your product augments or replaces an existing product, please tell me which ones. And please don't like pussyfoot around, like I don't want to name our competition. First of all, grow up. It's 2024 and we have the internet. It's like you're not hiding anything from anybody, and you can name your competition without bad mouthing your competition. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So like, but please tell me like I'm 5. Specifically now that we're getting more and more SaaS vendors that solve business problems as opposed to being a discrete tool that performs a task, it's becoming increasingly more challenging to understand just exactly what I'm supposed to use this product for. And I would use the example that if I'm walking around a trade show and I don't come up to your booth and get your pitch, if I can't tell from basically from like 20 foot away marketing collateral roughly what vertical you're in and what problem you're trying to solve for me, you failed. Your product pitch should not require an engagement and a discussion for me to understand the basic premise of it. I understand there's nuances and that's fine, but like if I see a sign that says auto dealership, right away I don't know what kind of cars they sell. I don't know if they sell trucks, EVs, but I know that I can go and get a motor vehicle there. Like, that's what I'm talking about. That level of understanding. I don't see that enough. And we'll get vendors who are trying to do the other things we talked about. They'll jump into the community all excited, and they just sort of almost seem to assume that everyone there is going to know who they are and what they do. And I've been guilty of this, and I see a lot of other people are guilty of this, and nobody has any idea what the fuck they're talking about or what their product does or why they should listen to them. Just tell us. If you make the best bleach alternative that competes with Clorox bleach, so I don't need to buy Clorox anymore, just say that. Like, that's not you besmirching or defaming anyone else. It's real easy. And it's super helpful for the rest of us just to have some context around who you are and what you do and why. And once again, this can be totally solved if you sign all of your posts with who you are and where you're posting from and what you sell. That's it. Fairly low bar. Just a couple of things that I'd love to see our vendors make a little bit more of an effort to do in this space to just kind of respect apparently these amazing houses that we've all built in the community. All right, so at the end of the day, all of the same points I made in the video about asking smart questions really stand here. Don't expect us, your customers, to do your work for you. I don't want to do your work. I'm an engineer. I'm lazy. I don't have time for that. I don't want to have to research you. I don't want to have to figure out a million things around you. I like people that make an effort to show up, that make an effort to support the community without making me buy their stuff. I'm far more likely to buy their stuff at that point. And we're not so dumb that we can't tell when you're not normally there and not normally participating. And keep in mind that not every social media channel has the same culture or cross-pollination. So you might be making a ton of effort on LinkedIn and no effort on MSP Geek or our MSP, and go post there and assume everyone's going to know who you are, and they probably won't. And they're probably going to rip you to shreds. And you may say, well, that's toxic and that's gatekeeping. Well, what if I was throwing a house party at my literal house and I don't know you, but you knew someone, you thought you knew someone there, and you showed up and just walked in my house? Well, would that be toxic or gatekeeping if me and everyone else there said, who are you, get out? No, that would be a normal reaction. It's the internet version of that. And it's 2024, so I don't want to hear any excuses about I don't understand how the internet works. I'm 40. The internet's been around for most of my lifespan. Do a little bit better. Vendors, I'm glad you're here. I think everybody's glad you're here. Just make that like 5 to 10% more effort, and I think you'll see big dividends from it, because we're clearly overall doing something right on this side of the industry. If our big brothers and sisters over in the enterprise space are looking at us and being like, ooh, how are they doing that? I want to replicate it. We're clearly onto something decent here. So let's keep improving it. Let's keep treating each other awesomely. Have a great Tuesday.